Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. And today's World of Tanks video is probably going to generate a fair amount of controversy in the comments, because we're mostly going to be talking about a subject that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts who play World of Tanks, and that's the subject of gold ammunition. Gold ammunition, or premium ammunition as some people insist on calling it, has been around in World of Tanks since the very start. It's not going away any time soon. Now, before we get started, I should make it absolutely clear that I have no issue whatsoever with Wargaming coming up with ways of monetizing their free-to-play product. It doesn't cost anybody anything to play World of Tanks, or it doesn't have to cost anybody anything to play World of Tanks. And so naturally, they're going to need to come up with ways of actually monetizing the gameplay. And there are a number of different ways that Wargaming have gone about doing that. Premium account time, for example, which has zero impact on the gameplay, and simply generates extra credits and experience for people who are playing with premium accounts. But then there are premium tanks, which in some cases are substantially better than their non-premium equivalents, premium consumables, and premium ammunition, both of which offer in-game benefits. Now, I would argue that premium consumables offer more of an in-game benefit than premium ammunition, because there is no downside whatsoever to using premium consumables other than the cost. Premium ammunition, however, despite what we may think about it, is not always an instant I win button. There are certain drawbacks associated with using most types of premium ammunition, and in a lot of cases you'd actually be better off firing non-premium ammunition, firing armor-piercing instead of armor-piercing composite rigid or high-explosive anti-tank. And we'll come on to that in a moment. But Jingles, why have you got this bee in your bonnet about premium ammunition all of a sudden? It's been around since forever. Why is it so special now? Well, I was watching one of Pointy-Haired Jedi's videos earlier today, and he was talking in particular about the Type 5 Heavy and the premium high explosive ammunition on that tank. And we have a Type 5 Heavy replay coming up right after this one, where we'll go into that in slightly more detail. But for the moment, this is ASB84, who I'm sure you'll all recognise and know as Dave, in the new British Tier 10 heavy tank, the Super Conqueror Range Target. You'll notice that this tank is covered in spaced armour. It's got spaced armour around the turret, and the turret's pretty tough anyway. I mean, if you do manage to slip a shot between the gun mantlet and the spaced armour, you still have to deal with 300mm of effective armour. Oh dear, that tortoise. He thought he could make it across the gap. He was wrong. Yep, he's not getting out of there alive. Now, Dave here has some premium ammunition. He's got the APCR there. But he doesn't need to use it. His gun has 259mm of penetration with standard ammunition, and it's got very, very good gun handling. It's accurate, its aiming time's good, and providing he can aim properly, there's no reason why he would need to use the APCR here. The same cannot be said for everybody firing back at him. He's just bounced a gold shot from the enemy Super Conqueror over there, but he's careful not to give these guys anything to shoot at other than his turret. The same cannot be said for that Super Conqueror. And there go his tracks. And he's burned his repair kit. Can he get back into cover before Dave does it again? Nope, not quite. Almost, but no cigar. And he's obviously got a very, very well trained crew, because just as Dave is about to fire again, the tracks come back up and he manages to inch back just a couple of inches, but it's not enough. And his premium ammunition is not getting through Dave's turret. And he keeps going right through the tracks, the spaced armour around the tracks, and the paltry 100mm of armour covering the side of the tank. Dave's gun's been hit, he uses the repair kit, bounces another shot, and finishes him off. There, easy, textbook stuff. So, speaking of which, this guy's just asking to be killed, and so Dave is only too happy to oblige. Bingo, 2 kills. Now, on the other side of the killing ground over there, we have an STB-1, Japanese Tier 10 medium, and a 121, Chinese Tier 10 medium. These two tanks have something in common. Their premium ammunition, their gold ammo, is high explosive anti-tank. This is ammunition that loses no penetration over range, unlike AP and APCR. It has exactly the same penetration whether it hits you at a range of 400 or 4 meters, but spaced armor beats it. And the Super Conqueror is covered in spaced armor. It's got 20mm of spaced armor over the tracks themselves count as spaced armor, it's got spaced armor all over the turret, and it's got spaced armor all over the upper glacis as well. The only place it doesn't have spaced armor over the front of the tank is the lower glacis, and those two managed to get shots into him by hitting him in the lower glacis as he came up over the ridgeline. But everything else bounced harmlessly. But here's the thing, their premium ammo was completely useless against his turret and his upper glacis. It was able to penetrate his lower glacis. But they could have penetrated his lower glacis with armor piercing, and it wouldn't have cost them 5,000 credits a shot. But some people just spam premium ammunition at absolutely everything that moves. Now, I'm not suggesting this is anything new, but I have been noticing it a lot more, particularly after watching Pointy-Haired Jedi's video where he featured a Type 5 Heavy that I mentioned earlier, and we're going to be seeing some more Type 5 Heavy gameplay immediately after this. But after watching that video, and then going through all of the replays that you guys sent in when trying to decide what kind of video I was going to do for today, I started paying a lot more attention to that hit counter down in the bottom left corner of the screen, right next to the damage panel, and I started seeing a lot of gold popping up there. But here's the question, and this really is the big question: is using gold ammunition paying to win? Because if it isn't, then what does it matter? Well, there's been an awful lot of people firing gold ammunition at Dave's Super Conqueror in this game, and they are definitely not winning. In fact, they're getting a damn good spanking. I would argue that it doesn't matter how much gold ammunition a bad player loads up. It's not going to make them any better at playing World of Tanks. In fact, in some situations, it's going to make them a lot worse, because not all gold ammunition is the right choice in every situation. We've already seen high explosive anti-tank ammunition get defeated easily by spaced armor. Armor-piercing composite rigid ammunition equally has disadvantages. Yes, it has higher initial shell velocity, but it also loses shell velocity much faster than regular armor-piercing. And that means it loses penetration faster than regular armor-piercing. So if you're shooting at a target at extreme range, APCR is not necessarily the best choice, particularly if it's a stationary target. Your regular armor-piercing, at the point of impact, is probably going to have more penetration, and if the target's not moving, the higher shell velocity, and therefore the less lead time you need to give to the target with APCR, becomes a non-issue. So regular armor piercing is probably going to be the best choice. But that involves thinking, and people don't like thinking. Thinking is hard. And so it's just far easier to wave the credit card at Wargaming, load up on the gold ammo, and derp it at absolutely everything that moves. It's not necessarily more effective if you're a bad player, but it's certainly easier. And so, back to the original question, is gold ammunition pay to win? I would say no, in the overwhelming majority of cases. In the hands of a good player, however, yeah, that's a different matter entirely. See, a good player knows when is the best time to use APCR, when is the best time to use high explosive, when is the best time to use heat, and when is the best time to just fire good old regular armor piercing, and they will make the most of it. A good player would know that you don't load the heat and then fire it into the spaced armor covering the tracks of the Super Conqueror. You stick to the regular armor piercing that you haven't until now had any success with, Mr. T110E5, and you penetrate him in the side using that. In that respect, I would argue that yes, gold ammunition is pay to win, but only in the hands of somebody that can actually tell the difference between their arse and their elbow. Luckily, there are an awful lot of people playing World of Tanks who have to be reminded to put their pants on before their shoes when they get out of bed in the morning and head off to do a hard day's work licking windows. But if you've ever looked at the battle results of a typical random game in World of Tanks, and you're constantly, time after time, seeing 2 or 3 people on each team doing the same amount of damage as the entire rest of their team combined, you have to start wondering. Now, the argument that I always hear is that, well, you can buy gold ammo for credits. You have been able to buy gold ammo for credits for several years now. And this was a very shrewd and astute move on behalf of Wargaming, because up until that point the only way you could get gold ammo, and the reason why it was called gold ammo, was because that it was only available for gold, and you had to buy gold with real money. So that was a smart move on behalf of Wargaming. At a single stroke they neutralised all of the accusations of pay to win. And yes, it's certainly true that you can buy gold ammo for credits, you can buy gold consumables for credits, but if you think it's not costing you anything, I've got some prime Louisiana real estate that I'd like to sell to you. The economics just don't add up. It is just not possible for you to play World of Tanks as a free-to-play game with a standard account, without buying any premium tanks, without spending money on premium time, load up your tanks with premium ammunition, and not run out of money within a day. And I'm going to prove it. This is Shockwave 117, and I should stress right now that I'm not critical whatsoever of Shockwave 117's gameplay. This is the Type 5 Heavy match that I promised you earlier. If you have a look at his ammunition counter, he has two types of ammunition available in the Type 5 Heavy. They're both high explosive, one of them's premium, and that's all he's got. And we'll talk about the premium ammunition on the Type 5 Heavy in a moment. Normally, people send replays in all the time where they've had exceptionally good games, but they find nothing but premium ammunition. And I hesitate to feature those kind of games because I feel that it sends the wrong message out to the people who are watching my videos. I'm quite happy to show Shockwave 117's video today because I think it illustrates several points very, very nicely. Also, everybody's firing nothing but gold back at him. So, you know, what goes around comes around. Now, about the premium ammunition on the Type 5 Heavy. I made a big song and dance earlier about the fact, and it is a fact, that it's not necessarily a good idea to just be firing premium ammunition, regardless of the type of premium ammunition that your tank carries, against everything that you see. High explosive anti-tank ammunition is easily defeated by spaced armour, or even the tracks of your tank. Armour-piercing composite rigid loses shell velocity much faster than regular armour-piercing, and also doesn't deal quite as well against sloped armour because it has worse normalisation. The premium high explosive ammunition on the Type 5 Heavy, however, has no such drawbacks. It's just better. The only downside to using this ammunition is the cost. The regular high explosive ammunition on this tank will cost you just over 1,300 credits every time you pull the trigger. It only has 75mm of penetration, but it will do up to 1,100 damage. The premium high explosive ammunition on this tank also only has 75mm of penetration, but will do 1,400 maximum damage, and it costs 5 times as much, 6,400 credits every time you pull the trigger. Now, if you've been paying attention to the damage counter at the bottom of the screen, you may have noticed that that FB215B over there has been basically emptying his pockets at the front of Shockwave's tank. Now, unlike earlier in the video, in the previous battle, I'm not suggesting that the 215B is wrong to do so. But it's not doing him any good, is it? And it's not because he's using the wrong ammunition. He has 326mm of penetration with his APCR, and it's just not enough. This IS-7 over here is another perfect example. He is going to do nothing wrong. He's managed to get his tank into an excellent position. He's side-scraping around that rock. He's not showing his vulnerable lower glacis. He's only momentarily showing the pike-nosed cheek armour. Against anything other than a Type 5 Heavy, or, you know, a Death Star firing Hesh, he would be solid gold over there. At the very worst, you could expect to maybe get his tracks blown off, but take no damage in the process. He's in a very, very good position. He's doing everything right. He's doing nothing wrong. But the Type 5 Heavy doesn't fire heat that's going to get eaten up by the tracks. It doesn't fire APCR that's going to get eaten up by the tracks. It doesn't fire armour piercing that's going to just bounce off the turret. It fires high explosive, and you don't even have to hit the target with high explosive to do damage. You're going to bury this next shot right into this guy's tracks, all the spaced armour above the tracks, and still does over 400, nearly 500 damage. His only real defense against this tank is to hope he misses. Which is possible. It's a horribly inaccurate gun. But he's doing everything right, he's doing nothing wrong, and he's still losing. Oh, Super Conqueror, spaced armor, no problem. 507 damage. He didn't even hit the Super Conqueror. He hit the spaced armor shield and still did 507 damage. How can this possibly be right? The IS-7 in particular, his reward for knowing his tank, playing it well, and not making any mistakes other than that, is to lose. How can that possibly be right? That's just, it's wrong on so many different levels. I don't even have the words to articulate it. He's trying it again, but it hasn't worked for him. So there. Hits him in the turret. Do you know how tough it is to penetrate the turret of an IS-7? Well, he's not penetrating the turret of the IS-7. If he'd penetrated the turret of the IS-7, he would have done 1400 damage. But this is the death of 1,000 cuts. And that wouldn't be so bad if you could do damage in return, but, well, he can't. The armour on the Type 5 Heavy is just ridiculous. I mean, an E100 is a very heavily armoured tank, but if somebody's loaded gold and is aiming at the front of an E100, the E100 at least has to turn the turret to the side to angle the turret face, otherwise he just gets penetrated right through the front of the turret. You don't get that problem with the Type 5 Heavy. I mean, Shockwave is having to angle the tank, but you need more than 300mm of penetration to penetrate the front of an angled Type 5 Heavy. And you can count the number of machines in World of Tanks that have more than 300mm of penetration without firing gold ammunition on the fingers of one head. But even firing gold isn't really working out for these guys, is it? Look at this. This is the turret, the front of the turret of an IS-7. Bang. 342 damage. It's a far cry from the 1400 damage that this shell could be doing if it penetrated, but still, nothing else would be able to do that kind of damage to an IS-7 in that situation, other than the infamous FV215B183, the Death Star, because that also fires high explosive ammunition, or the British version of it, high explosive squash head. And if you have a look at the map and see what exactly is backing Shockwave up, yep, there's a Death Star behind him. So these guys cannot get around him into a position where they're actually going to be able to do any damage. How can this possibly be right? What is their option? It doesn't matter how good they are. It doesn't matter whether they are a better player than Shockwave 117. They may very well be better players, they may not. They haven't really had much of an opportunity to show it because they have just not been able to kill him. They've managed to do some damage. It's not that the Type 5 Heavy doesn't have a frontal weak spot. It does. There is a hatch over the driver's port, but good luck hitting it. It's about 6 inches wide. It's like trying to bullseye womp rats in Beggar's Canyon, or fire a proton torpedo down the thermal exhaust port of a Death Star. It can be done, but you need a bloody accurate gun, or you need to be very, very close. And you don't get that many opportunities to get close to a Type 5 Heavy, certainly not on this map, in this position, without taking a metric shit ton of damage in return. Shockwave 117 took 14 hits during the course of this battle, every single one of them from Tier 10 heavy tanks. Tanks that are supposed to be the equal of this thing. Tier 10 heavy tanks firing gold ammunition with more than 300mm of penetration, and of those 14 shots that he took, only 3 did any damage whatsoever. All he had to do was angle the tank just a little bit. He didn't even have to turn the turret away. Something that E100 drivers learn to do very, very early on, when people are firing high explosive anti-tank at the front of their turret. Otherwise they become dead E100 drivers very, very quickly. I must stress, by the way, that I'm not being critical of Shockwave 117 here. I'm not saying he's a bad player, far from it. He's done exactly the right thing in this tank on this map. And if it hadn't been for some support on the corner, those enemy heavy tanks would have overwhelmed him, got around him and finished him off. But he did have support on the corner. And so the IS-7s, the Super Conqueror, the FV215B were not able to safely get around and attempt to penetrate his equally monstrously tough side armour. Watch this shot. didn't even hit the bat chat. That was a miss. That didn't even hit the tracks. That was splash damage. And he still did more than 300 damage to the bat chat. Oh, this tank, man. Still, if you thought that one was good, watch this. It's almost Russian accuracy. Oh, there he is. And gotcha. Shockwave 117 didn't do anything wrong in this match. He did absolutely everything right. But then again, the IS-7s that he was fighting didn't do anything wrong in this match. They did absolutely everything right, and it didn't do them any good faced with the Type 5 Heavy firing premium high explosive with backup and support from a Death Star. And the Centurion Action 10, who was also in a hold down position and offering some good support back on that corner as well. And surely that's got to be wrong. If you're playing your tank well, if you're not making mistakes, you shouldn't lose. Okay, somebody has to lose. And if there are players on both teams playing their tank well and not making mistakes, individual skill should be what determines the outcome. And again, not being critical of Shockwave 117 here, but do you really think individual skill is what determined the outcome of this game? Based on what we've seen, because it's all we have to judge from, can we state with complete confidence that Shockwave 117 is a better player than the drivers of those IS-7s, Super Conqueror and FE215B? Or do we think it had more to do with the tank that he's driving and the ammunition that he's firing? Because unless we can say, yes, he's clearly a better player and that's why he won, then we have a problem. Well, hang on a minute, Jingles. I get your point, but how is this pay to win? He's in a Type 5 Heavy. It's not a Tier 10 Premium, is it? You don't go out, spend $100 and buy yourself a pay to win Tier 10 tank. Anybody can grind their way to a Type 5 Heavy. You're absolutely correct. And that's an entirely different issue. But here's the thing. He won this game, as you'd expect. He played well, he did more than 5,000 damage, and his armour blocked nearly 5,000 damage as well. But that victory cost him, with a premium account, nearly 70,000 credits. His ammunition reloads alone cost him nearly 110,000 credits. So what that means, and remember this is with a premium account, so he is already paying and still losing money with this kind of ammunition expenditure in his Type 5 Heavy. So what that means is that every time he plays the Type 5 Heavy, he has to load up a Tier 8 premium tank, go out and have a pretty good game in that, we're talking do a minimum of 3,000 damage, in order to generate the credits that he needs to continue playing the Type 5 Heavy. And the last time I checked, Tier 8 premiums weren't free. So, is this pay to win? Because he won, and he is very definitely paying for it. Discuss in the comments. That's what they're for. Anyway, hope you enjoyed today's video, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.